Hello, Copic in the Craft Room fans. Michelle Houghton here. I've got a new to me company. I have not worked a lot with Inky Antics, and I found this little stamp set. It is really intended more as a holiday stamp set. The sentiments are mostly holiday but related, but I felt like the little snowmen look like they're almost melting at the bottom half, and I just thought this is the perfect time to introduce them to you. So I am going to start with my favorite snowman color combination, which is BV20 and my colorless blender. So I'm doing kind of a squiggle or a scribble little kind of work around the edges of my snowman with that BV20, and then I'm coming in with colorless blender. A ton of you have seen this from me by now, whether you've seen me in a live class or on my YouTube channel. What I love about this color is as I hit it with the colorless blender, it kind of pushes that violet back and leaves a little bit of that blue behind. So we have this really cold color left behind, and it fades a little bit to white. I just love that effect for snow. I think it's really the perfect color to create that cool piece to add some shape to my images around those edges and to kind of create that dimension. So the next thing I'm doing is I'm coming back with my BV20 and I'm coming underneath the fur-lined cap, and I'm also coming underneath his nose to create a couple cast shadows just to, add a little dimension to him again. That's going to pop some of those pieces forward. And I'm not going to do it on everything. I'm not going to try to figure out exactly on the arms and little mittens and stuff, but I'm hitting some of those significant areas to add some of those cast shadows. Then I'm going to work on these little birds, and I'm going to say they're blue jays or bluebirds, and I'm going to start with a B12. So it's a pretty saturated color, nice bright blue for that underlying color. You're not going to get a whole lot of that color left behind. I really wanted its face to stay that lighter color, and then you'll see a little tiny bit of that on his belly and kind of tips of the tail and wings. You'll see as I add the next two colors here how that plays out. So B24, I'm going to go around the face, and I'm going to flick out to the little crown, fill in the tail, leave a little bit on the tip of the belly and a little on the tip of the wings. I'm going to do the exact same thing on bird number 2. So they will be kind of twins. They look like they're kind of the same bird. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same color. And these are pretty small images. This is a B29, and you're going to notice I have swapped out, and I've got that sketch fine nib on this particular marker. I only have a few of those in my set that I've done that to, but in this case it worked in my favor because I can add these small details. So smaller amounts of the B29 kind of dotting into that stomach, flicks out on the wings, on the tail, kind of adding a little bit of that texture into those feathers, or trying to accentuate that a little bit. And I jump all the way back to B12, and then I go right on the edges, right where I left behind that B12 showing, and work into the B24 and the B29. That's just going to soften those edges. It's not going to make them disappear or have a true smooth transition, but it's really going to soften them. This group of markers is a pretty happy blending group, so it does really enough of the blending for me to get the look I am going for in this particular case. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little color onto his carrot nose, and I've got a YR14 that I'm starting with. And I realized this a while back. If you're looking at the cap on my marker, your cap might look completely different. That changed over time. So some of you, if you have an old one, it's going to look like mine. If you have a newer one, it looks much more like the actual color. It's a lighter orange shade. YR18 came in from the bottom of the nose and kind of curled around in some of those creases, and then softening with the YR14. Coming back to my BV20 on the cap, on the fur, and then also on the little puff ball. And this time I've just done dots right along that bottom edge, right along the bottom edge of the little puff ball too, coming back with my colorless blender again. Same effect, it's going to soften it, really create that blue violet effect. And just as a side note, that's really one of the only blue violets that I've seen that effect happen that significantly, just so you know. Then V12, I'm going with some violets on the little hat. So I'm going to fill that in with V12, and then I'm also going to fill in kind of every other square on the scarf, working down that direction, and the little mittens. So someone's coordinated this little guy really well. I know that I'm going to come back in from the bottom edge with probably a darker color, so I'm not like getting this real saturated base. And I also know that the colors that I'm using are going to be good blenders. So I'm just getting that base layer. I've got a V04 coming in from the bottom edge. Again, as much as anything, I'm trying to create a little bit of shape. So I've come in on the bottom edge, kind of creating that cylinder on the gloves as well. The scarf, debatable about the actual shape, whether it curves kind of under, has a little bit more of a curve to it, or if it's more flat, but I'm kind of playing with that still as well. V17 is the darkest color, and that's just going out along the bottom edge, so same areas that the V04 went, but in smaller amounts. And I don't add any onto the mittens. I kept those a little bit lighter. Stepping back to V04, that was that mid-tone, and softening the edges of the V17, starting there. And again, this is a color group that I've worked quite a bit with, so I know that they are going to blend really easily together. Just so you have a sense too of timing, the video itself is going to be about 10 minutes long. The image only took about twice as long as what you're seeing, so this only got sped up like by 2. So really this is fairly close to what the real time is. It did not get sped up a whole lot more than that. So V12 is last. I'm coming back and smoothing out the edge of that V04, hitting the mittens this time because that needs that little bit of smoothing too, or blending, softening that edge of the V04. So I'm working from the V12 into the V04, and it will get a little darker. We've put another layer of ink on the V12, so that area will get a little darker. So on the other squares, I'm actually going to go in with a BG000, and I'm filling in those opposite squares, and then I put a few stripes of that eventually on that patch on his little hat. And then B00 on the bottom edge of the scarf, again just kind of creating a little bit of dimension, and actually that's where those stripes come in, sorry. B04 is the opposing stripes. And really the scarf didn't need blended. You'll notice I skipped that step because those two colors were it was so saturated and so wet to begin with. They kind of blended on their own. I'm putting touches of E33 on the arms and E21 on the beaks of the birds. So just little touches. I'm just filling in there, not trying to do a whole bunch of layering. So the last thing I'm going to do is I am going to come in and I'm going to use BG000, and I'm going to flick out from the image. I'm not going super far, and obviously I've stamped these a little too closely together, but I'm going to soften that with colorless blender, and then eventually I will cut this out and separate it from the other ones, but I'm not going to fussy cut. I'll go around the kind of a broader edge. If I do this group of images again, I will definitely give them more space in between. I did not give myself enough space this time. Anyways, this little guy turns out really fun. I had a great time coloring up this little Inky Antics image, so thank you so much to those folks there for sharing their artwork with us. Softening that edge of the sky there with the colorless blender. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Make sure if you've got any questions, Copic related or related to this video specifically, leave them in the comments. I try to stop by at least weekly to answer all of those and check in with all of you. Also, if you haven't had a chance, go by my blog at www.scrapweaver.com. That has all of my live classes and doings and more inspiration. Links you up to the Facebook page and YouTube page and all those things. Thank you again for joining me this week. Have a happy, colorful week.